So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this BASF event under the title Leading the New and Sustainable Industry, a Competitive Future for Europe. Thanks both to our physical audience joining us today here in Tarragona, and also to all of you who are watching the event online. Thanks as well to the URV University for joining and supporting this initiative from BASF. And finally, we also want to thank all the speakers who are going to take part in the event this afternoon. The conference on the future of Europe, firstly mentioned by the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, in late 2019, is a citizen-led series of debates and discussions that will enable people from across Europe to share their ideas and help shape EU common future. The conference aims to reflect EU diversity and to bring Europe beyond its capital cities, reaching every corner of the Union, strengthening the link between Europeans and the institutions that serve them. It does so through a multitude of conference events and debates organized across the Union, as well as through an interactive multilingual digital platform. Young people, in particular, are encouraged to participate and share their ideas. That is why we're here today. We're going to talk about the future, we're going to talk about Europe, and we are going to talk about the industry. But before that, what is exactly the Conference on the Future of Europe? To know more about the initiative, let's watch the following video.
Imagine your future. Imagine our future. Imagine the future of Europe. Over the coming months, the Conference on the Future of Europe is your chance to share ideas on what that future will look like. 27 countries, 9 themes, 1 goal, to give you the power to shape our future. From climate change to migration, democracy to the digital transition, it's the biggest ever consultation of its kind. Come and share your ideas on the multilingual digital platform and debate with other Europeans. Take part in one of hundreds of events in person or online. Or why not organize your own grassroots event in your community? Your ideas, submitted on the platform and formulated at events, will be examined by citizens' panels before being presented to and discussed by your representatives. The conference's executive board will then present the results to the 3 EU institutions, which will use them to make concrete EU policy proposals, policy based on the hopes and ideas of Europeans. Visit futureu.europa.eu and get started today.
So, as you all have seen in the video, the conference is an open initiative with multiple approaches and topics to be addressed. Our focus today is going to be centered, of course, in the industry and particularly on which drivers are needed in order to achieve a competitive and sustainable industry. But before that, it's time for the institutional opening of this session. First of all, I would like Mr. Benjamin Hepfer, who is the BASF Tarragona site manager, to join us up here on the stage to address the welcome words to the audience. Benjamin.
Yeah. So, before getting rid of the mask, maybe, if that can help me. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So, thank you, Paco, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to all of you, not only to the ones here present in person, but we know that also a lot of guys are following us here virtually, following this event. And I would also like to thank to the university and its president for joining as a partner to this initiative to talk about industry and the future of Europe. Also, I would like to thank you for hosting us here in these great facilities. This, I think, makes a big difference here in the Seminary of Tarragona. Today, we will speak about the future of Europe. But before starting, I would like to express our true solidarity to all the ones who are suffering from the war between Russia and Ukraine. The future of Europe is at risk. And in these difficult times, we are standing with the people of Ukraine. Perhaps some of you may not have heard much about this initiative yet. We've seen some spot now, but so what is the Conference of Europe about? This is an initiative organized by the 3 European institutions: the European Commission, the European Parliament, and the European Council. And the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said, and this is remarkable, the conference is for all Europeans to debate a shared vision of how we want this union to be. So we must ensure this is not an intellectual policy exercise or a political compromise. We must listen to all voices, whether critical or complementary, and ensure that we properly follow up on whatever is agreed. That were the words of Ursula von der Leyen. And the 3 institutions have committed to listening to citizens and following up in their respective spheres of competence on the recommendations made. BASF wants to listen, contribute, and share its proposals to this debate. For this reason, BASF has organized different events within the framework of the Conference of the Future of Europe, with the aim of collecting the contributions from all of you, society, stakeholders, and young people, and sending those recommendations to the European institutions. Today is the 3rd event that BASF organizes in Europe. Previous events have already been organized in Sweden and France, and in the upcoming months, more events will be held in other countries of the European Union. Today we will talk about the future of the industry in Europe and in Spain from different perspectives and points of views, which I'm convinced will be critical to reach consensus and agreements. The industrial sector, and the chemical sector in particular, is a generator of employment and economic activity, and it's present transversally in many value chains. Let me provide you with some basic data on the chemical industry here in Spain. The chemical industry accounts for 5.5% of GDP and 3.7% of overall employment in Spain. The chemical sector is the 2nd largest exporter in the Spanish economy, only behind the automotive sector. The chemical industry is also a leader in innovation. Last year, more than 1 billion euros were allocated to research, development, and innovation, which represents a quarter of the total private investment in this area. Likewise, every one of 5 researchers is contracted by the chemical industry to practice their profession. European industry is facing great challenges. The COVID-19 crisis has highlighted the interdependence of global value chains and demonstrated the critical importance of a well-functioning and globally integrated single market. Europe's energy dependency is another of the challenges we have been experiencing in recent weeks with the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Climate change, the reductions of emissions, and digital transformations appear as risks that we must be able to transform into opportunities for growth. Today we will talk about these challenges and opportunities with experts who will give us their vision on how to make the industry competitive and sustainable in the future. What are the key drivers that will allow Europe to maintain and increase its industrial capacity? How will the new European regulatory frameworks affect the competitiveness of the industry? And how to mitigate the impact of energy costs to remain competitive? These and other questions are the ones we will try to answer throughout today's session. So I wish all of us exciting discussions and a great conference. Thank you. Gracias.
So thank you very much, Mr. Hepfer. Now it's a turn for the welcoming words of the President Rector of the Rovira i Virgili University, Mrs. Maria José Figueras Salvat, please.
Hello, everyone. Members of BASF board, head of the European Commission, vice president of the site. For me, first of all, I would like to congratulate this initiative because it's rare that sometimes reach the outskirts of Barcelona events like we have today. So I think this is really a good example of this integration of the society required by the European Commission. I had prepared a small presentation. Just first, let me introduce the university for the ones that you may know exactly. Our university is defined as the motor for the socio-economical transformation of our territory through the lifelong training strategy of generating, transferring knowledge, innovation, and technology. We are split over 6 campuses. We have around 19,000 students, which they all have, they can be trained in almost all subjects. If I may go on, our university is one of the 22 Spanish universities that belong to this European University Alliance. Our alliance is the Aurora Alliance, and what it have in common is that all universities belonging to this alliance, they are high in research production, they are all committed to social impact and to give an effect on the community in which they live. And in this sense, I have to say in this, I don't know how you see this graphic, it's a graphic that represents the production, the scientific production in relation to if it have a higher or lower impact. And in this sense, as you could see, in the upper part of the square, it's what University Rovira i Virgili is. Our partners in the Aurora Alliance, they have these triangles. The Catalan universities are in purple. The yellow ones belong to Spanish universities. And you could see that close to us, a bit far away, of course, it's Stanford, Harvard, MIT. That means that our university and our partners in Aurora, they are foreseen from abroad as very productive universities from the point of generating new knowledge and transferring it to the society. This is the results of our rankings within this alliance, but this is our specific ones from the University Rovira i Virgili. In fact, one of the most important things is that our university had aligned its plan and activities along the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, and with the aim of disseminating them among our community, but furthermore, to get it over this knowledge and this feeling for transformation. With the rest of the stakeholders, we share a lot of activities. We, of course, make many recommendations, simple ones, but we do many other things. In reality, we are going to have panels of photovoltaic solar plates on all our buildings, and that's for other members of the community to foresee how you can have this approach of generating your own energy that we can even share with the community. If I put some examples, many of them, I don't know if you can read it very well, but they are examples of how the university is implicated in, for instance, promoting the ethical behavior, or simply on the internationalization, on promoting lifelong learning, and in addition, in the employability of our students. And it's in this sense that we have our strategy for occupation and increased job opportunities relies in 3 pillars. The first one is to perform and to define curriculum for the students that can be responding to the needs of the society. So we are constantly changing and training our students in even transversal competence, these soft skills everyone is calling for. In addition, we have this mentoring students, which from every simple thing, like, for instance, having this dual training, we had initiated with the chemical faculty as one of the first ones, and we follow with other ones in the near future. In addition, we have this occupational observatory that provides us with data to take decisions, how we are performing for society. And as you could see, in reality, around over 85% of our bachelor's, master's, or PhD students, they get a job in the 6 months after the incorporation of finishing their studies. Another important thing is that every year, 2,000 students do internships more than in 1,000 companies and institutions. And as I mentioned, this dual training, we have a lot of perspectives because approach the student to the company can select the best students, and the students can have their fair experience in company. First of all, this is also an important thing for us. 6% of our graduate students are having a job at the chemical industry of our sector. And that means 80% come mostly from engineering, chemical engineering, and the chemical faculty. In this sense, 20% comes from economy, law, and other of the knowledge that are required in the industry. It's in this sense also that our university, with this compromise with the territory, visualize it in a certain moment that all the chemical industry, all our region needed a transition. And it was in this sense that we took the coordination of the Hydrogen Valley of Catalonia to build a new ecosystem of renewable hydrogen for climate neutrality and economical prosperity of our region. In this moment, there are 158 stakeholders participating, 51 projects, almost mature. It's calculated that will have an investment of 1.2 billion euros. It will have a high reduction of the carbon emission, and in addition, it is estimated it will provide a high employability for our region. So, in just finishing, I could not list all the people, but we have our institutional business promoters. We have our knowledge alliance with the institutes of research linked to our region, our university, and the companies. And I want to underline that among them, you could see BASF as one of the actors of this transformation we require for our community. And what will be my message, or our message, to the European Union at this moment? At this moment, the most important thing for us is that it can foresee, we should recommend that the European Union policymakers is giving the universities the needed resources to perform and generate knowledge, which in reality is what our society needs and what has been demonstrated along this pandemic. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mrs. Maria Jose Figueres Salvat. Next, we would like to welcome on today's event Mrs. Victoria Alsina, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Open Government of the Government of Catalonia. Mrs. Alsina, thank you very much for being here this afternoon and sharing with us your reflections and the actions of the Catalan government in the framework of the Conference on the Future of Europe. So please, Ms. Alsina, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, senyors i senyores, un plaer estar aquí. Board members, representatives, authorities, I want to first start sharing my gratitude to the organizers, to BASF and to the Rovira i Virgili University to invite me to be part of this wonderful conversation that you are having here today. I wanted to start sharing with all of you that I think that this is a timely debate, the one that you are having together. I'm honored indeed to be in Tarragona and to be part of this conference on the future of Europe. As part of the Catalan government, we also decided to be part of this conference and to organize some activities and around that. And, you know, we were deciding which should be the tagline of our participation in this conference as a government. And we decided to call it "The Future is Europe." That was the tagline that we have chosen. And I think it was a good one, considering all the debates and the conclusions that we were able to reach during all those weeks in which we organized several roundtables in different parts of the country. And I should say that that was a good initiative because we were able to discuss which is the future in the mid and long term for all of us and our institutions. Because I think it's important to put some background here and to start saying that when we talk about this conference on the future of Europe, it also arrives in a timely year, in a timely moment. The origin of the European Union, as we know it today, started 70 years ago. It was, of course, as you all know, the end of the World War II. And since then, at the end of the day, we have lived the longest period of peace and unprecedented prosperity in Europe. So I think that should be the starting line of all this chapter. And indeed, in Catalonia, we always have been growing and we always had strong European roots. And you can see that when you review the past history, but also the more recent history. And it started much more before 1986, when Spain formally joined at that moment, the European Economic Community. And I think it's a good sentence to remember. It was precisely in 1986, President Pujol was, giving a speech as part of these EU events that happened at the time. And he said a sentence that I think captures well which was the spirit that the Catalan people felt at the time. He said, we go back home, right? Because Catalonia has been always, or tried to be always, part of that European conversation. So when we review history, as I said, right, we need to remember these 70 years of peace and prosperity. We also need to highlight a couple of events that have a special relevance in this context. One, of course, unlikely, is the withdrawal of the United Kingdom. That was a different thing after so many successive waves for enlargement. And the other thing, that time in a positive way, is the reaction that the EU institutions had after the outbreak of COVID-19. and this huge package of funding that moved forward to be able to overcome all the challenges that arrived after that. And if you see all these pieces together, right, you may arrive to the same conclusion that in 2020 it was a good idea for the European institutions to promote this conference on the future of Europe that congregates us here today. Because it was an opportunity, as they frame it at the beginning, to do an open call for participation. Indeed, is the largest participation process that the EU institutions approved and moved forward. And they suggested, as part of that, a list of topics to discuss, all of them very relevant for this future. As a Catalan government, as I said, we decided to participate in this conference, and we started also a double slogan campaign. One, it was "The future is Europe." The other, it was "Listen Europe," because that's a message also that is important to share. That's the need that the European Union can listen all the public and private institutions and what we need to say in all those debates. And indeed, we organized these 8 roundtables. We covered all the topics that the EU institutions were putting on the table. We, for example, dedicated one session to economy, social justice, employment, and digital transformations. We dedicated another session to climate change, of course, and the environment, and all of them were covering all those topics that the European Union framed. And indeed, we were happy to organize 2 of these events precisely at Universitat Rovira i Virgili, one here and one in Tortosa. And indeed, the universities were our partners for this project because we organized all these activities, always connecting them to one university, one of the universities that we have here. We added one topic that it was important for us, that it was the Catalan language and how this can be, or we want it to be, an official language inside the EU institutions. And I think it was also a productive conversation to put that on the table for the moment in which we are living, in which we need to put an special effort to protect languages and our diversity here. Anyway, I think that one of the big consensus that exists is that despite all challenges that we all know well, there is a positive message to share, that is the shared commitment to the EU at the end of the day, right? And also, in this sense, I return to the COVID situation, because at the same time, COVID and this largest stimulus package that it has been approved by the EU institutions is indeed the huge opportunity that the European institutions have to be more legitimate and to show that they are really useful for the society. So I think we are now in a moment, this conference is taking place in a moment in which we have a lot of challenges, but also, and probably, the largest opportunity for these EU institutions to be next to the people, companies, and entities' needs, and to show how they can improve, connect all of us, and move forward all this cooperation. So with that said, I should say that in this great next generation EU opportunity, there is also a concern because a lot of regions in Europe want to have a bigger role in this decision-making process behind these funds and also in the implementation of these funds. And this is a problem that is also shared by some major stakeholders in the private world. So how we should distribute the governance of these funds and all this decision-making that comes after. And I'm really hopeful that we will be able to overcome the initial challenges that we have seen, not always following the current model, the subsidiarity principle that is part of the values of the Union. And as I say, this is a positive message. This is a huge opportunity if the governance is good for the European Union to be more legitimate after this huge investment that they are doing. And I should say that 77% of the European people in the last poll said that they agree on this. So it's also a big consensus among the society. My final message that I wanted to share with all of you is precisely that in this Europe Key Future Challenges and Debates, it's not only necessary to listen to the public institutions, but also the private ones. And this is because it's so relevant that this Conference of the Future of Europe also happens here today, right? This is a future that we need to write with so many hands, and the private hands are also an important piece of the cake. And also, I should say, on top of that, the importance to bolster public-private collaboration as part of this joint venture that we have all together. You will agree with me that the chemical industry, in that regard, has a lot to say. It is an industry of industries and an essential part of our daily lives and well-being, right? It has a direct connection with the improvement of human health and life expectancy, and is one of the biggest allies that we have to move all the proper debates forward. It's also relevant, I think, that it's an industry that has the capacity to create highly qualified jobs and also help to Europe's competitiveness. And indeed, that's only for that reason it's very important that is listened in all these conversations. Indeed, I want to say that BASF is a very illustrative example of how this industry can become an essential piece of the economic growth and job creation, in this case in Tarragona and in Catalonia as a whole. It's also true, and I know very well that you are determined to do so, that there is also a challenge connected to the fact that we don't have a planet B, and all of us also need to work together for this sustainability and this transition. And precisely because of that, it's also very important to connect everything that the industry has to say to this European bigger strategy on the chemicals strategy for sustainability. And that's a debate that it's interesting that happens also in the framework of this conference. Just a final conversation to finish my initial words. I think that this investment on sustainability and competitiveness is something that we need to do all together. The European industry needs us to work together and need the governments to create the environment that is appropriate for doing these transitions that at the end of the day will benefit all of us together. I want to finish with a sentence that someone told me once. I think the author is Paul Valéry, that said that the best way to make your dreams come true is to wake up. So wake up together and let's continue this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Victoria Alsina, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Government of Catalonia, for your enlightening reflections about the conference on the future of Europe. And now it's time for our panel discussion under the title, Leading a New and Sustainable Industry, a Competitive Future for Europe. So first of all, let's introduce our four panelists. We are very happy to welcome in Tarragona today Mrs. Saori Dubourg, who is member of the Board of Executive Directors of the BASF Group. She is responsible for BASF's global businesses in monomers, performance materials, petrochemicals, and intermediates. Furthermore, she oversees the region Europe of the group, the startup Trinamics, and the BASF Corporate Sustainability Board. Dubourg is also member of the German Council for Sustainable Development, which advises the federal government on implementation of the sustainability strategy. Welcome, Ms. Dubourg. We also want to welcome to the panel Mr. Javier Garcia, President of the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry. Previously, he served as member of the Executive Committee and its Bureau. He's also Professor of Inorganic Chemistry and Director of the Molecular Nanotechnology Laboratory of the University of Alicante, where he leads an international team working on the synthesis and application of nanostructured materials for the production of chemicals and energy. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our third panelist today is Mr. Jordi Oliva, Project Director of Good Karma Projects. He's an industrial engineer with an MBA. He co-founded the non-profit Good Karma Projects organization for sustainability in board sports, aiming to redefine the board sports industry as a leading example of how things can be done better for the planet and for the people. In parallel, Good Karma started developing citizen science and educational programs and rapidly evolved into a social environmental project. The organization is now well known for leading the pellets pollution issue through the Western Mediterranean. Welcome, Jordi.
Thank you.
And finally, we're also glad to welcome in our panel Mrs. Mercedes Teruel, full professor in the Department of Economics at the URV University. Since 2021, she is the coordinator of the master's degree in entrepreneurship and innovation. She's the winner of the Richard R. Nelson Prize 2016, awarded by the editors of Industrial and Corporate Change and Research Policy. Welcome, Mrs. Teruel.
Thank you.
So, the European Union Green Deal is the central flagship of the EU Commission and provides framework for a wide range of political projects. It is conceived as a climate project aimed at making Europe a climate-neutral continent, as a social project as well to support a just transition, as an economic project seeking to rejuvenate EU investment and competitiveness, as a European project to give new purpose and unity to the EU, and as an international project to support the EU Commission's intention to become a more geopolitical one. The Green Deal will impact business significantly in the next decade. Whilst, on the one hand, legislation deriving from the Green Deal is likely to bring increased regulatory risks, there are also opportunities to shape this industrial transformation and benefit from it. So we're going to know more about this initiative with the next video.
I want Europe to become the first climate-neutral continent in the world by 2050.
European Green Deal could be a cornerstone for changing our politics,
The Just Transition Fund is...
If we want to deliver, obviously mobilizing EU funds
reconnect.
That's exactly what we want to do.
Most importantly is the works which are going to be done.
Appropriate support for their new obligations.
We need everyone, and no one will get left behind.
As we continue to battle the pandemic, we must also focus on our long-term challenges. This is why the Green Deal, as a growth strategy, remains our compass throughout the recovery.
We will reduce emissions by at least 55% by 2030. And today's agreement puts us on a clear path towards climate neutrality in 2050. It gives certainty to investors, to businesses, to public authorities, and to citizens. It future-proofs our union.
So, to begin with the panel discussion, I'd like to address a common question to all four panelists. As we have seen in the video, Europe is leading the world in the transition to a zero-emissions economy by 2050. But, in fact, this is a global challenge. So, do you perceive that there is a risk that other important regions of the world won't follow our ambition? And secondly, do you think that the European Green Deal is the right framework to achieve a decarbonized economy and a competitive industry in Europe? I don't know if any of you wants to start. Okay. Javier, for example?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Why not? Why not? So, good evening. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, BASF, for allowing us to create chemistry together, and also especially to the students. I see many students in the audience. Every time I see young people in the audience, I get more inspired. So I think the European Union is giving us a wonderful opportunity to think the future together. But we need to be very clear here. There are many parts of the world who are not benefiting from chemistry advances. 1 billion people don't have access to clean water. And yes, we can keep passing regulations in Europe and big objectives, but if we don't work together, if the whole world is not trying to meet the same objectives, we are going to fail with the Paris Agreement and with the objectives we have to reduce CO2 emissions. So here I'm trying to offer IUPAC as an international platform, also for the chemical industry. So we discuss topics not only at a regional level, but also at a global level. One of the learnings from the last few weeks is that it doesn't matter how much money, how much focus we put here in Europe about different objectives. Problems are global, and we try to solve them regionally. I hope that the chemical industry, chemists in general, are going to understand also, like many other actors, that to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, we need to work in international forums. And IUPAC is the common house, the common place for all chemists. In the same way, United Nations is providing a forum for everybody to discuss topics of different interest. I hope also chemists are going to start discussing things not only at regional level, but also at international level, so everybody can benefit from the benefits of chemistry. One of your questions were even a little bit tougher. Is the Green Deal the right framework? Maybe it's the right framework. Indeed, there are plenty of resources. Maybe there is not enough time to implement all those resources. It's plenty of money, but only 3 years to implement those solutions. But one thing is clear. In a few weeks, we are running again to buy and consume more natural gas and oil. If we are serious about reducing CO2 emissions and our dependency on fossil fuels, why we are paying the barrel of crude oil $120 and trying to get natural gas from any source. So I think now this, I wouldn't call it conflict, this invasion of Russia into Ukraine is creating, is awakening us from the dream, and is in a way forcing us to see the reality of how dependent we are of fossil fuels and how quickly we need to transit to cleaner technologies.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you very much to the University of Tarragona, all the students. Thanks for your interest and also the representation of the government. We are very thankful to be here. And it's a pleasure to be in Tarragona for us, because it's not only about Barcelona, it's about everyone in the European Union. You know, the former speaker, she made quite an important point, which I want to re-emphasize. You talked about 70 years of peace. You know, sometimes we take the EU for granted, but it's not. And while some people out there are currently giving their lives to become part of this, I think we need to start appreciating the European Union maybe also a little bit more than in the past. Because the liberty and the freedom that we lived in so far is not for granted anymore. Having said that, if you ask me, is the Green Deal the right framework, and are we running in front of everyone? I want to make one thing very, very pronounced here. It's, for me, wonderful to see that the EU has a vision. The Green Deal is a clear strategy. You might argue it's right or wrong, but at least it's a vision. Why do I believe this is the right vision to go forward? Because climate change will not go away. And the question is, what's a good strategy? A good strategy is not to change constantly if something new comes up. A good strategy is even relevant in 20 years from now. And I tell you, Green Deal actually addresses something with the climate change that will not go away in 20 years from now. Conflicts might change, but the climate change will not. So the key question for us, and I want to allude to what you said, how do we make this transition successful for the European Union? And as my pre-speaker said, it's a collaborative approach between governments, civil society, and firms and companies to make this happen and make a new growth strategy out of this for Europe. What do I see in terms of chances and risks? When we looked at the regulatory framework of the 250 regulations, and I think we have a lot, that's my first message, I think we have not a lack of regulations by now. It comes with significant financial risk for a lot of industries, and I want to emphasize this. These are fundamental changes for a lot of molecules, lots of products. However, it also comes with chances. More than 100 new innovation markets will develop. What are they? carbon-related solutions, new sustainable transportation technologies, lightweight vehicles, hydrogen technologies, new materials, biodegradable plastic, alternative proteins, just to name a few. The interesting part, and that's the positive message, these markets have a higher growth rate than the past, and this could become the next growth story for a resource-efficient society. What's the risk? And I try to keep it short. As you said, we have seen that we have to solve the energy mix question in Europe. You know, the United States is self-sufficient based on all kinds of shale gas, oil, and so on. Europe still today and until 2050 has more than 50% need for energy imports. This means the challenge today, and we saw it with the Russian-Ukraine crisis, and I hope that's not the beginning of our energy crisis. I really hope. But this is exactly what we need to solve jointly as Europeans, how to make this a consistent flow of energy even in the next years to come. This is what we need to jointly solve, and the renewables is part of it, but they will not completely solve this. So a clever energy mix is the watch out, and here I agree, this will not come from just designing new regulations. We have to close contracts to do this and to bridge into the future.
Exactly. Very good. It's been a contrasting intervention with the issue of the lives that we have taken back. So now I would like to ask the same question to Mrs. Teruel, for example.
From my point of view, I think that there is also a risk that there are different speeds in order to achieve our common goal, which is to achieve sustainable goals. And from the point of view of the European Green Deal, I agree that they have the right incentives. They have a really vision where we must go. But also I would like to claim that what we needed is that the public administration modernize in terms of whether they are managing all the budgets and how we can achieve these goals. So I think that we have the vision, we have the goals, whether how to go to these objectives.
Thank you, Mr. Jordi Oliva. I don't know what your thoughts are on this topic.
Well, I totally agree on what's been said on the table, but just mentioning and what Javier was saying, I think we're quite tight on schedule, like for the implementation of all these measures, and I mean the target it's quite high. So as long as we invest in realistic technical solutions, we're good. We're on the good path. But the thing is that we'll be soon talking about, let's say, new technologies, the chemical recycling and so on. And we need to do this approach with a holistic analysis and seeing further, like science-based solutions, and not wishing what could be done instead of thinking and being technical on all these decisions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting. Well, we're here in our discussion panel, and let me mention that along with the people that are joining us here today in Tarragona, we have 800 people now following us online at this moment, so I think that is quite a success. I'd like to ask Mr. Javier Garcia, what role do you expect that science will play, and knowledge as well, science and knowledge in the future? Can we achieve the objectives of the Green Deal without what I would call a science vision?
So without science, we are not going to solve these critical issues. That's to start with. Why? Because it is science which is allowing us to understand the problems. And understanding the problem is the basis to tackle the problem. That's number one. Thanks to science, we also know the consequences of not action, of doing nothing. And that's also very important in terms of setting up priorities of public policies. That is also very important. And finally, this is probably the most obvious one, science also contributes to create the solutions, the discoveries, the new technologies that we are going to be using to stop depending upon fossil fuels, which is so important. But science is not going to solve the problems for us. At the end of the day, it's people. That's why this unique opportunity by the European Union, inviting us to have a shared vision, is so important. Because at the end of the day, science gives us the knowledge, the tools, but at the end is political will, which is lacking in the European Union, right? Leadership and political will. But I think you were also asking me a little bit about my own dreams, how I would see the future, right? So if I could ask...
Everybody okay? Yeah.
Maybe I said something wrong. Thank you. Maybe I said something wrong. Okay, but if I can make a wish for the European Union, this will be to implement policies to close the gap between academia and industry. This is critically important because in Europe we make some of the best science in the world, but many of these innovations never reach the market. In my own experience as a chemistry entrepreneur, that has been the most transformative action that I have ever made. Not only making a discovery, and of course the eureka moment is great, but actually taking the risks to create a team, a business plan, raising funds, scaling up the technology is fantastic. But in the chemical sector, entrepreneurship is not easy. You need a lot of funding, you need distribution channels, you need to scale up, and that's why I want to invite also the chemical industry to allow us to create chemistry with you. That's extremely important, and especially here in Tarragona. I cannot I cannot prevent myself of referring to this place, because here in Tarragona you have all the elements, I would say all the chemical elements. You have one of the best, more versatile chemical hubs in Europe. So that's something very important. You have a lot of talent. You have a fantastic university. The rector already showed us some very impressive figures. And also you have here the ISIC, a research center with some of the best chemists in the country. So with all those components, with all those chemical elements, you can really change the future of Europe. But in a way, we are still a little bit isolated. We talk about academia and industry and the gap, and I think the chemistry entrepreneur, those scientists who will not stop by just publishing their papers, will dare to start a company, will really change this century. So that's my dream, that we will have a smaller bridge between industry and academia in Europe, so we will benefit from all this science.
We certainly hope that your dreams come true. Mr. Bohr, BASF as a chemical company has a strong presence in Europe. What does the industry need in order to stay competitive in Europe?
Yeah, I want to build on what he just said, because I want to encourage, because what we just did at the EU Commission level, we discussed with the DG Innovation about a materiality matrix of new materials, the markets that we talked about, and we have installed this by now. So the future grid of opportunities. Now, there was a dialogue, and maybe we need to connect where we said what would be wonderful if now the mid-size and different companies across Europe take the initiative up as a pilot together with academia and young scientists, because that's the future in Europe, to really work on these fields. Because with that, exactly as you say, we could create a push. So the first input for us to stay competitive is, of course, education and good people, and that's why I'm glad we are here, because I see a lot of opportunity sitting here in the room already. But the second one, and this is a real wish also to politicians, I mean, you know, the regulation framework will lead to a major transformation across almost every single part of our company at this point in time. You have to imagine, for example, to make this concrete, in the farm-to-fork strategy, reducing the crop protection offtake on the field by 50% is describing and adding to the dilemmas that the industry has to solve. What is the dilemma? this industry has lost 40% of arable land due to climate change over the last decade, which means the industry had to increase the efficacy by 50%. And now we have to reduce, because of biodiversity, the use of plant protection products by 50%, while 3 billion people more are on planet Earth. So what I'm trying to say is, these dilemmas we are able to solve. However, we need dialogues with the political framework, because every sector has different now transformational challenges and time horizons. So what we really need are roadmaps for each industry, how to transform from one status A to be. For example, we have energy-related projects at this point in time where we invest heavily in carbon neutrality, many different routes, biomethanol cracker things, and methane pyrolysis is just a few keywords that you know. These are partially in F&A status, in the R&D status, but there's also pilots that are out. This will take time. So if you talk about a reduction of CO2, it will not happen like on a continuous basis, but it will take time until the development of the technology is done, and then we have to implement it across various plants. And these kind of time horizons, links to renewable grids, is not discussed at this point in time to the extent that we can easily implement it. So my request would be more dialogue, not only between science and industry, but also with the political framework, how to make this in a competitive way, like the energy question that I mentioned before.
Thank you so much for your words. Mr. Jordi Oliva, from the local perspective, how do you foresee the relationship between the industry and the territory in the forthcoming 20 or 30 years, for example?
So I would like to see the territory and the industry like getting closer, in the sense of we have the new channels of information now available, and we have the chance to let the local population get to know what's happening behind the industrial facilities, to let the citizens understand what's being manufactured, what's being developed by the local industry. And I think this will let to the population understand and appreciate what's happening here in the territory, and what's the let's say the positive and sometimes negative impact of all what's being done here. So I think in that sense this would be a good way of developing the relation, since let's say there's a volume of people that still doesn't know certainly like what's being produced here. So in this sense, like getting closer will help like the local population understand what we're doing in the facilities.
There is a challenge indeed in this area. Mrs. Teruel, do you think that the needs of the industry are totally aligned with the academia? How can we improve the binomial industry and university? Mr. Garcia just spoke about it earlier, but what are your thoughts on this?
From my point of view, I think that the university is totally aligned with industry goals. For instance, we have seen before that the University Rovira i Virgili has as a main goals the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. But it is true that university has constraints on its resources, and sometimes we have to delimitate where we are going to invest our resources, so we have certain limits. How we can improve this relationship? You have been talking before about dialogue, and that dialogue at the end it is information and also cooperation with our resources. That means that we can go further still by sharing the information, which are the needs of the industry, how we can give a solution by our teaching and also our research and so on. So this is the way that we can improve.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mrs. De Boer, Last summer, the Commission released its Fit for 55 package supporting its commitment to reduce net greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030. Besides, in March 2020, the European Commission adopted the new Circular Economy Action Plan to promote more sustainable products, empower consumers and public buyers, ensure less waste, etc. So can you give some details about some BASF initiatives in circular economy and transformation towards net zero?
Yes, on the circular economy, maybe to really give that information to the audience, the target of the EU is really that by 2025, the usage of recycled materials should be at 10 million tons. And today, it's just 14% of the total plastic that is recycled. So we have not only created an industry alliance on how to take, bring this back into the recycling mode, but I want to inspire you about one thinking, because circularity is not just plastic, recycling or chemical recycling. It goes back to a deeper thought of how we deal with resources. So one German designer, Dieter Rams, who was famous also for the later inspiration for the Apple design, he once said the time of thoughtless consumption and thoughtless production linked to thoughtless design is over. We cannot afford to stay thoughtless anymore. We have to think much deeper how we design products, how they are used, and how we bring material back. And so we see 6 archetypes for recycling. Number 1, for example, bio-based material, but we see also an increase of leasing models. If you think about kind of vehicles, e-vehicles that are shared, we see that people have also different longevity in their product lines. That's another way of recycling. And this leads to totally different product requirements, more longevity rather than a throwaway society. And last but not least, we see the recycling opportunity. And I can only give the message to the EU Commission here. We would love to work closer together. We need all recycling methodologies, from mechanical recycling up to chemical recycling. And these methods are today not fully granted for packaging laws and so on and so forth. And this is hindering currently the industry to roll this out big time. So what we do on the circular economy to put this together is really in each of these pillars of the archetypes, we have very concrete product examples. We work with big conglomerates. For example, Henkel is working with us on a bio-based product range where the packaging is completely already recyclable, but it's also the product in itself that has a different content. And for the net zero, I spoke about this. We have multiple projects at the moment in the pipeline, and there is a double-digit number in terms of millions just also going in all kinds of selected agreements with wind parks and so on, really to change our whole infrastructure. I can only say that this is a lot of work at this point in time, but I do see we will come to a net zero. But it is quite a lot of tedious work because it's also linked to a lot of plant setups that we have. And there's a lot of ideas coming right now from the teams as well, how to save CO2, which I just could see in the Tarragona site, which was wonderful. Because it's not always the big projects, it's very often the good ideas of the people on the ground.
Mr. Garcia, as you are an expert in chemistry and also in the industrial sector, how do you imagine the chemical industry in Europe in 2050? What will the most disruptive changes be or have been by then?
So let me follow on the concept of circular economy, because for the circular economy to exist, we need to implement first a circular chemistry. This is very important. When we teach chemistry, it could be a condensation reaction, an alkylation reaction. It's always A plus B to give C, right? It's the way we think about chemistry, in a linear way. In fact, I keep saying that the icon, the symbol of chemistry is not the periodic table, it's the arrow, it's the transformation. But that's not how nature works. Nature works in cycles. So we need to start teaching chemistry, doing research in chemistry, and implementing chemistry in the plant in a way that when we produce B, we already have in mind that particular product so it can be recycled back and be transformed again in a raw material. That is my vision for the future of the chemical industry. We need to decouple economic growth from environmental impact. That is the priority. In order to do that, we need to rethink chemistry, not in the way we have been doing so far, as a science and industry of transformation, but as a science and industry of reuse. And it's a completely way of thinking about chemistry. This seems like a nice academic idea, but no, it's a reality. And I want to give you two examples of how this is possible. One is about the photoconversion of CO2. CO2, it can now be transformed, and actually pretty high yields, into solar fuels, into plastics, methanol, formaldehyde, many different products in a realistic way. So that's already an opportunity of how a byproduct can be transformed into a raw material. The other one is plastics. Now we have a new generation of plastics that can be depolymerized to recover again the monomers and then being used to make them again. It's not so much chemical recycling. It's a new type of plastics that have breaking points in the molecular structure, so they can be disassembled and then reused. You see, it's a completely different way of thinking about chemistry from the very beginning, from scratch, in the way we think about chemistry. So that's very important. The other thing I want to say about the future of Europe, but maybe about Southern Europe, Spain, Italy, Portugal, Greece, when we have a lot of sun, a lot of wind. So I would like to see a future of the chemical industry based on renewable energy, so not so dependent of natural gas and oil. And here in Spain, in Portugal, in all our region, we can be the factory of green electrons. We can produce very cheaply, very efficiently green electrons. But if we sell these green electrons, we are selling things at the beginning of the value chain. It will be much more interesting if we take these green electrons and we make green hydrogen, like the president of the university has been explaining. And from this green hydrogen, green ammonia. For example, Iberdrola and Fertiberia are building in Puerto Llano a very big factory to produce green fertilizers. Same thing with the refining industry, with the plastic industry. It will start using these green electrons to make green hydrogen. So a completely new industry designed from the beginning. That will be my dream. And the last comment, all this exciting new science, this new way of teaching chemistry, it needs the entrepreneur. That person who will be making the discovery and want to transfer that to the chemical industry. And then it will not be just a dialogue, it will be a partnership between the universities, the public sector, the right policies, because this really needs a lot of time and investment. So that will be a little bit of my vision for the chemical industry in Europe and beyond.
We have been talking about technologies, the disruptive changes, and the future of the industry. Mr. Garcia just mentioned hydrogen, and I would like to ask Mrs. Mercedes Teruel, from your point of view, what will be the role of hydrogen? What role will hydrogen play in the industry in this future?
From my point of view, I think that hydrogen is going to have two different impacts. Internally, companies, as Mr. Garcia has pointed out before, companies, they will have to adapt, and that means to invest money in order to adapt and create new companies, indeed, for this new energy. And also, we are going to have new jobs. You, as most of the audience today, they are young people. Most of you are going to have jobs that perhaps still they are not still created. And that means that you will have to be training and be educating continuously in these new technologies, in these new energies. And this will cause that the companies, they are going to have a challenge in order to adapt continuously. This is at the internal level. Externally, what we are going to observe is that the companies will follow and they will achieve more easily the path of the decarbonizing their impact. So we are going to see how they are going to achieve more easily the the sustainable goals. So from my point of view, this is the main impacts.
Finally, Mr. Jordi Oliva, we know that every economic activity has its impact, positive and negative impacts towards society. So from your point of view and your experience as well, how relations between the industrial sector and society can be improved?
I would say like simply by talking openly on the negative impact. I mean, we talk a lot about the positive impact, we talk a lot about the job creation here in the territory. For example, BASF is doing super well on social initiatives locally. But then I would say for improving this relation, we need to be able to talk openly about some negative impacts, like air quality, water quality, safety. It's been happening a couple of years ago, 3 years ago. And I don't know, maybe I would say during the last year, for example, that we've been talking a lot about this pellet pollution. I would say that not trying to find any responsibles on this issue, I would focus on trying to, or we would be super happy to find some leaders that are willing to tackle the issue locally and in a constructive way, willing to move on. And I think that would be super appreciated from, let's say, from the society here. Like thinking more on the ones leading and tackling the problems and the negative impact to move on and turn it into something positive, rather than putting it below the carpet and making it difficult to put the issues on the table. So that would be like the transparency and like the CSR and now as ESG. That this is something that there's been promoted a lot from this industry here and doing super well on the positive side. But let's start tackling the more the negative ones, like talking openly about that and willing to move on those topics.
Okay, we take note. There's a challenge there as well. So we're here today talking about Europe and talking about its future. It's necessary to think of the current situation in Ukraine. Some of you already mentioned, but I would like if you briefly could, if any of you has any message on that, from your point of view and from a European perspective, how can Europe deal with this situation, and what could the consequences be for European industry? Mr. Borg, please.
Yeah, maybe let me do one thing, because you referred with a very interesting statement also to us, and I just want to respond immediately, because I was with the team today, because of exactly the openness. I have to admit, and I want to say this now very clearly, we are a company that works on perfection. And maybe that is a part of our mistake, that our leaders think we always have to be perfect, which sometimes leads that we are not maybe open enough, and that's why I appreciate your comment. Today I went to the team in Tarragona, we had a very open conversation, and I told them I would be so thankful if things come up, please tell us early on, don't be afraid. Let's talk openly, we are open for that. It's important also to be responsible in the community, and I really take your message. I hope we addressed part of this today, the response was very good, and I hope that's the beginning of the change that you wish for. So that's just an immediate response to his question.
Of course.
On Ukraine, let me say the following. Personally, quite frankly, over the last weeks, I was very much in charge of looking together with the crisis team into our Ukrainian colleagues and the situation in Russia, because we have a crisis team by now. And for me personally, I have to admit it is a really humanitarian catastrophe to see what's happening at the moment. My team in Ukraine, just to give you that immediate feedback, is now half the size. Why? Because our colleagues, all the male ones, are currently at the border and they're fighting, while the females are still in the crisis team trying to help. to get things done as good as they can, and it's heartwarming to see this. So this is the human side of the problem, and I want to go now into what is the consequence for Europe. It's a bit harsh to go now into the industry-related impact, but you know, I think we are at a very, very important situation now where we have to make up our mind. It's a critical situation, and I want to emphasize this, also talking about some things that might be negative, and this is more the energy question that we are now facing while we are today, and I haven't seen the result the EU Commission is talking about on the oil and gas embargo. It comes with a challenging question of competitiveness of Europe and at the same time showing attitude. That's the dilemma we are in. And there is no easy answer to this, but what I can say is, you know, we can now either complain and describe the situation, or we use it, as you said, as a change for a fundamental transformation that goes in the direction of Green Deal. And why is this also not only a critical situation, but a chance? I don't think we will solve it with renewables completely. We will have, even in 2050, more than 50% of energy that needs to be imported, to be pretty clear, even if we expand on renewable. However, we have to think more deeply about the paradigm shift from a volume to a society of a resource-efficient value age. And that's, we see this in the X space already, we see it in different business models. There's a fundamental shift of less but better in terms of resource usage. And that's the opportunity for Europe now. So instead of just watching paralyzed into the crisis, I can only motivate you. Let's innovate for the next decade of a resource-efficient age, where plenty of opportunities, technologies, and brilliant people like you here on the panel are there. Let's work together on a future that's maybe a little bit more of an independent, robust growth with new technologies, because there is the question of balanced energy mix that we need to solve, where renewable, and especially Spain, can play a major role, because the energy mix has to be solved European and not only local. And I think Spain can play a major role in this. Yeah, we haven't explored this on a European level enough. The innovation of resource-efficient age brings a lot of innovation fields, and we have to think about reducing interdependencies in a world where we have more and more block building. So having said that, you know, my advice would be going with Ellen Key. It's better, you know, the best way to predict the future is to create it. And that would be my pledge to you.
I don't know if the rest of the panelists have anything to add on Ukraine. For example, Mr. Garcia.
Yeah, I'm going to answer this question in three different ways. First of all, on a personal level, as a European, I was an Erasmus student. I feel very much a European citizen. What is going on in Ukraine is extremely painful. I could never thought that we will have another war in Europe again. So this is extremely saddening and frustrating. That's one reflection on a personal level, extremely sad. But we cannot be paralyzed. That's a very good point. Number two, it was mentioned before the Brexit. And also in the last 2 or 3 years, we saw how Poland and Hungary and other countries in East Europe were not feeling so pro-European in a way. And with this crisis, they are the most pro-European countries again. So only through this kind of military invasion and all this violence, we have realized how important it is to stay together. To stay together. Together we are stronger. That's extremely important. And also to follow with the values of the European Union, which are human rights and accepting refugees. Extremely important at this time. And now, as president of IUPAC, on March the 1st, the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry released a statement condemning the violent aggression of Russia against Ukraine. This is not a war between Ukraine and Russia. This is an invasion, a violent invasion on a sovereign state. And we also may call upon the Russian authorities to respect the international agreements and make sure that our scientists, our scientific institutions, our universities are kept and not attacked. So IUPAC very quickly responded to what we saw. It was a humanitarian crisis, and also in our statement we made very clear that we as IUPAC are always against violence as a way to solve conflict. We will face many conflicts, we can have different opinions, but going to war is never the solution. We are working with the International Science Council to provide resources, assistance and opportunities to scientists in Ukraine and in Russia that could be dissidents from the Russian government in Europe. So they will have a welcoming lab or university or industry, if possible, to continue with their lives. And finally, one reflection, just again, as a young European. We can keep thinking about what kind of Europe we want to build. Our competitiveness, supply chain, energy crisis. But one of the lessons from the pandemic and from this invasion is that we need to solve problems at global scale. It's very important to talk about Europe, but all these problems, from the pandemic to war, and we are talking about the one in Ukraine, but I want to raise here the issue of the war in Yemen, in Central Africa, in Ethiopia, a civil war. All these are countries of IUPAC, and we feel the same pain if the countries are European or not. And we need to deal with these things at an international level, and that's why, again, as IUPAC, many people call IUPAC the United Nations of Chemistry. I want to offer this platform as an international, as a global platform to deal with any conflict in the chemical space for industry and academia. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jordi Oliva, any brief comment on the situation in Ukraine and its impact, its consequences?
Well, nothing much more to add than what they said. Yeah, it's a humanitarian crisis regarding Ukraine, and I wouldn't say much more about that. The thing is that it's quite a pity that we've been realizing how we rely on fossil fuels and our dependency on those kind of energies. But at the same time, it's, let's say, we can take it as a chance to start, of course, investing in green energy.
Mm-hmm. And Mrs. Teruel?
More or less, I agree with my previous colleagues. We must learn that we must go together. We must give answers which are common to all of us in order to fight against all these threats. This is my first thought. The second one concerning the industry, we are seeing since the COVID-19 shakeout that the market is getting more volatile, and that means that industries, they will face much more uncertainty, and they will have to adapt in this much less expectable future. This is the main impact at the industrial level. And also organizations and companies will have to learn and move in this new context.
Thank you. So it's been very interesting so far, but we also want to hear questions from the audience here today. So I would like to invite anyone having a question to ask it. If you raise your hand. Okay, we're going to ask you to stand up, and if I'm not wrong, we will ask you as well to go to the central aisle so that the camera can catch you, and people watching online are going to be able to see you. Or perhaps that's okay. Is it okay there for the camera? Okay, so go ahead, please. You need to say to which of the members of the panel the question is addressed to, please.
No, the question is addressed to whoever wants to answer it. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the interesting debate, and it's been a great opportunity to understand the main challenges of the sector. So my question being, which do you think are the best ways in which companies, institutions, and universities can exploit their synergies? That would be my question. Thank you very much.
So I think that this applies to almost everyone here on the on the table, but I don't know, perhaps Mr. De Boer, do you have, or Mr. Garcia? Okay, go ahead.
I'd like to start, but since you asked me, I think the Sustainable Development Goals provide the right platform for finding synergies. If you cannot find synergies between academia, industry, and government within the Sustainable Development Goals, we will have a problem. It's about gender parity, it's about diversity, it's about reducing poverty, fighting illness, climate change. Pretty much every major issue are in the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm extremely happy to tell you, you don't know, that this year is the International Year of Science for Sustainable Development, where all international unions are working together to bring those discoveries to industry, to the administration, the public sector, to implement them. So again, I think the SDGs are the best channel for synergies. I hope that this is going to create jobs. That's the main thing I want to emphasize, by being more sustainable, for emphasizing on diversity, which is so important. We can produce better jobs here in Europe, but at the end, at the very end, the SDGs, all the problems we are facing are global. And again, we need to dream of a better Europe, but problems and solutions need to be global.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, maybe to add and build on what you said, I think you're absolutely right. You know, we only win as a society if we, like governments, industry, and science, work towards societal needs and, you know, basic SDG targets, as you said. But maybe to add one thing, I think the real challenge, and you alluded to this, is that we are not debating too local. Yeah, I think what we see, take the energy question, it's a global question, because it's not only the gap we see right now in a gas supply or something. This comes in a framework where the United States is fully, you know, covered, and China is also importing 20%, and this has an impact on the global value chains. Yeah, I give you another example where I see still a little distortion. Yeah, to put a little bit of water into this wonderful wine. It's about, there is while we speak here, one of the biggest paradigm shift happening while we sit here, and this is in the capital market. I don't know whether you are aware that this year alone, more than 33% of global assets under management, you know, investments are linked to sustainability right now. In the United States, it was $21 billion already in this year, and that's as much as the whole year 2018. Now we see an uprise of capital market looking now into ESG relevant innovation. Now, where is the little tragedy here? And it's not the guilt of anyone, it's just happening. We have by now so many different methodologies to measure impact, like in the European Commission, the taxonomy, which is one element. We have the EFRAG task force, which is the other. We have then in the United States, the TCFD. You don't need to remember this. This is a different methodology. So what we don't have is a joint language. And unfortunately, our markets are global. Now, this is a big, you have to imagine the transformation is so huge, because for the first time, the capital markets evaluate not only profit optimization, but also the impact on environment and society, which is new. You would say brand new, because our whole financial system comes from 1500. Luca Pacioli, an Italian monk, invented this kind of balance sheeting, and now all of a sudden we are changing a 500-year-old system. That this doesn't come easy, it's clear. But what I think we need, because that's the financial backbone of this transformation, we need more collaboration also among institutions to come to a common language, and that means compromise. Because we as you know, companies cannot solve this anymore alone. Yeah? And this is where the dialogue between industry, institutions, but also financial institutions, for example, is needed, just to make this very concrete.
Thank you. I think we still have time for another question from our audience. We have two hands, okay. If we will change the
question
the
or
side,
a different point of view.
Okay.
Thank you. My question is for Jordi Oliva. How do you think that social and environment actions will evolve in Europe in the next decade?
So,
I think that the non-profit organizations, the third party itself, it's evolving in the sense of that it's getting closer to the companies and to the administration. And in this sense, I think we all need to work aligned with the SDGs and so on, that it's been commented. But I think that, let's say, the mindset of going all together, like towards solving the same mission that we have all, the climate crisis. So this would be, I think, the way that it's going to be evolving, since we've been seeing that part of change already, and I think it's going to be getting better.
Okay, we still have time for one last. We had one hand there. A quick question and quick answer, please.
I was just wondering, I'm a student from IQS, and I'm just facing the professional life. I've been studying all these years, so now I'm just wondering, with all the debate that you had, all the goals, how we as students that we are facing the near future, and we are the future of the industry here in Spain and all in the world, we as students, how we can solve these problems and approach these problems. To Javier, for example, the question. Thank you very much.
So you are the future. If you cannot solve it, nobody will. And I give you three pieces of advice. First of all, study a lot. The simple solution, I keep telling that to my students, it's simple. But the problems are very complex. With easy solutions, we are not going anywhere. So we need bright minds. So study a lot. Second, find your passion. If your passion is working for a large corporation, go there and work for a large corporation. If you want to be a scientist and making the discoveries that are going to solve our big issues, more than welcome to become a scientist. But if you want to be really, really brave, become a scientist who finally becomes an entrepreneur. Make a discovery, and dare to try to put that into the market. That will be the whole journey, from creating the discovery to implement it in the industry. The best decision I made in my mind was to become a scientist. Allow me to solve big problems, to meet interesting people, and also to have my own technology that I can commercialize. It's a great adventure. So there are many options. Science is the big adventure of our time. So study a lot, follow your passion, and if you can, start a company.
Anything to add from any member of the panel, perhaps Mr. De Boer, or
Yeah, I mean, what can I say after such a passionate speech? I want to give you the message, don't underestimate your own potential. The biggest unused room is the room of possibilities. And, my personal experience here was with the impact investment route. 10 years ago, we were sitting together in a coffee shop, and that's a true story, thinking about the financial markets, that environment doesn't have a value, and humans are still a cost factor in terms of salaries in companies. And we were wondering whether a system, where the capital market is just steered to optimize profit alone, is good enough, solving all the challenges that we will face in the next decade. And at that point in time, we were thinking, we are generation internet. It's a bridging generation between the millennials and baby boomer. And we were thinking, is it good enough for my generation just to optimize a little bit? Or don't we have the responsibility to change these kind of impact measurement for your generation? This was a crazy thought, I tell you. And we were thinking, okay, then let's, and we aligned among the three of us, we will go for that no matter what happens. Today, I'm so happy, and I did not imagine that this would ever happen. We are part of a wider community in the financial world shaping exactly this new balance sheet for the future of you. I would not have thought that this is possible 10 years ago, quite frankly. There was a lot of laughter, a lot of resistance. But my lesson learned is I thought it's like a little stone that you throw into the ocean. Who am I, right? And it's creating small waves and then it's gone. I was underestimating that the energy always comes back. So if you're willing to change something really, the biggest secret is don't give up. Go for the big ideas and look at the room for the potential. And don't underestimate yourself, what you can influence and do.
Very clear. Time is up for the panel discussion, so thank you very much for all your comments today. Stay here at the table, please. Now it's time to close this event, and for that purpose, I'd like to call on the stage Mr. Carlos Navarro, Managing Director of BASF in Spain and Portugal. Carlos, please.
Well, thank you very much, Paco. Good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, thanks a lot to the four panelists, Saori, Javier, Jordi, and Mercedes, for these very insightful and I would say inspiring thoughts, especially the last thoughts for our students who are here present, and on these reflections on the future of Europe. So these are grave moments, we know. The war in Ukraine is disrupting our legitimate expectations of peace and democracy in Europe. And against this backdrop, some people would think that the reflections in this debate could seem trivial or even unnecessary. But in my opinion, they are more necessary than ever. These are dynamic moments and everything seems to be changing around us, but especially in these moments, we need a very cool and steady hand. We need to resolve the urgent short-term challenges, which are plenty, and we know them, but we also need to keep the long-term focus on the big societal problems. So we have heard Saori Dubourg of BASF talk about the firm support of BASF to the European Green Deal and the commitment to a future based on carbon neutrality, electrification of industrial activities based on renewable energies, and adoption of different circular economy processes, which, if done well, could lead to a new growth strategy. And she also clearly stressed the need for an open and constructive collaboration among European countries, and for chemical innovations as the lever that can provide solutions to the biggest problems. She also mentioned regulations that could transform our European reality and challenges for the chemical industry derived from those legislations, which put us in front of dilemmas that need to be solved with the collaboration with politicians. And also she mentioned that the European Green Deal could accelerate the energy transformation that we need in our continent. Javier Garcia mentioned not once but 3 times that problems are global. And for that, we need global solutions. And she also offered UPAC as the common house for chemists to address those problems. She also talked about the vision for science and the need of people to make that science vision realized. And also, she addressed a couple times the entrepreneurship route for chemists to contribute valuable solutions to society. She also talked about circular chemistry as the path to make circular economy feasible. And she also stressed the potential role of southern countries, and especially Spain, as the future factory of green electrons, an image that I really liked a lot. So Mrs. Mercedes Teruel put the accent, the stress, on the need to modernize public administration. Also the fact that the university operates within certain constraints that limit their options, the need for dialogue, and also explain the potential benefits of the hydrogen economy, and then the need to address uncertainty, which is very high because of these volatile markets and the need of companies to constantly adapt to these changing environments. And finally, Jordi Oliva talked about the need to get industry and territory closer together. by means of transparency. Transparency that should allow us to talk more openly about the positive and also the negative effects of science and industry, and the need to find solutions and leaders who want to step in front of those problems and develop those solutions. So I think this was an excellent opportunity to remind ourselves of the need to stand united and to work together for a common future. The challenges are multiple. It's not possible for any single company or government or entity or NGO to solve them. So we're all interdependent, and we have seen that very acutely in the common situation of war. But Europe is a world leader. We have heard that many times in peace and democracy and respect for the human rights, and is also leading the path to a better and more sustainable planet. So I think it's our common duty as Europeans to do whatever is in our hands to progress toward that future. So, and finally, I just want to thank the panelists again, but also the very honorable Minister, Mrs. Victoria Alsina, from the Catalan government, and also Mrs. Maria Jose Figueras, the Dean and Rector of the University, for their presence and contributions to this event. And our sincere thanks to all of you who have been following this event here with your presence, and all those who are following online in this fantastic venue of the Tarragona Seminar. So we appreciate your support to this event and hope that you have been energized by the proposals and the thoughts exchanged today. So good afternoon to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Carlos Navarro. And of course, with this speech, we have arrived at the end of today's event on the future of Europe. We want to thank again all participants in the session, and especially, of course, we want to thank everyone that has been following the event, both here, presentially, and online. Thank you, and see you next time.